So I am definitely a hacker, and I feel not worthy of this stage after everyone that's been up here, but I'll do my best. And I'm about to get real with you. I am going to reveal a few things to you that most of the people even closest to me don't know, as the introduction to something I find really important in the promotion of the understanding of neuroplasticity and what that really means for all of us, kind of struggling with who we are and finding our way. So I was bulimic for 10 years, all the way up until I was caught by my RA in college. And throughout my 20s, I spent most of my time obsessing over something that was, very bad for me. And then when I would get caught doing that thing, I would switch to a new thing. I had this, desire to control my environment, and that was the one thing I control and have like a secret that I can hold dear, and kind of keep me afloat. And I would try all the kind of self-help books and ways to kind of get me over the destructive behavior, but nothing ever seemed to really stick. I'd always feel as though that, well, this is them, they can make these changes, but I'm just wired differently. I can't overcome this. I am my mother's, daughter. I am, my father's daughter, and this is just kind of what's been passed down to me, and there's not much I can do about it. And so I've really felt hopeless for, all the way, and I'm 30 now, so I say through my 20s, so I'm kind of still coming out of like this transition period and really trying to keep everything together. And so despite my social media success, I was in Vanity Fair, I have a ton of followers online, I've built social media campaigns for Ford, CNN, BMW, Coach, Hearst. I mean, I've really made a name for myself. So on the outside, everything's wonderful, but on the inside, there's this internal struggle, which I think we all deal with, to a certain extent. And so this idea of hopelessness, I started listening to a lot of brain kind of science stuff, and I came across this story. This is Paul Bach-y-Rita. He's one of the founding fathers of neuroplasticity. He created a chair that allowed blind people to see. He's one of the founders of the cochlear implant. And he's really made huge strides in our understanding of the brain and how one section can take over for another. And his father, Pedro, suffered a stroke when he was 65. That was totally devastating and totally debilitating. He couldn't speak, he couldn't walk. After 6 months of standard therapy, the physical therapists and those that are in charge of kind of bringing them back up to speed basically said there's just no hope. Put him in an institution. And so they asked Paul and his son George to come get him. And George, Paul's brother, took him down to Mexico, and he had the standard therapy, but he started doing this kind of, innovative therapy because he didn't really know what to do. So he said, "Dad, you started out crawling, we're gonna get you to crawl." And so he would have his father, try to stay on, his hands and on his knees, and then finally started to support him up against a wall, and they'd do that for a little while, months and months. He'd have him in the garden playing games with him, like tossing a ball to him, and his father would try to toss it back. He would put his hands over the computer, and his son would pick up one of his hands, he'd just slam it down on the keyboard, just trying, very gross movements, just trying to get, that function back. And after a year, Pedro went back to teach. He got all of his, everything was restored, and he was back to living a normal life. Now, what's interesting about this is that 7 years later, he was climbing a mountain in Colombia, and he suffered a stroke and passed away. And so when they brought him back to the lab, at that time, in order to figure out how they, what happened, they dissected his brain and put him out onto slides and brought Pedro in, and they could see the excitement on the scientist's face when he was showing them these slides. And what they noticed was he had a major, hemorrhage and complete loss of a big part of the back of, his brainstem, and it was still damaged. And this was the first time they'd seen in humans, definitively so, that the brain must have reorganized itself. Other parts of his brain took over the functions that part of his brain was previously doing. And so neuroplasticity, and the reason I'm really excited about this is because Neuroplasticity is essentially, the fact that the brain can reorganize and restructure itself based on what it does. So what you think, what actions that you commit yourself to, and even what you imagine, and everything that goes through your mind is just electricity connecting dots. And so when we talk about habits, and when we talk about kind of this is who I am, and I'm just hopelessly like this, it really is so connected to a system that really has nothing to do with you. It's all based on conditioning. And so I feel like myself and a lot of my friends and the people that I know also suffer. I mean, we can be really successful at work, but we have like these things that just keep us down, and we just can't get over it. So neuroplasticity, what's interesting about it is when you understand the science, when you really start to understand what's happening at the neuronal level, what's happening with the synapse, you can really start to make changes based on the understanding that we all have the same brain. We might have some deficiencies here, or some hereditary stuff that we're dealing with, but it's the connections that matter, and we can change those connections. And there's a lot of ways to promote plasticity in your brain, and I want to go over 3 different ways that have helped me the most, in which I hope that we can go to our friends and our family and those that are struggling, and instead of tossing them a book that's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and saying just get over it, giving them real tactical ways and tools that they can use to understand how their brain works, so that when they're trying to make changes, they can sense that they feel progress and kind of know what's happening in their brain. There's something that clicks, I feel, like once you really understand what's going on upstairs. The challenge is that there's still this dogma. Like, I still think that even though we know all of this stuff about science, and everyone's telling us, that our diet makes a big difference, and then we go out later at night and we have beer and pasta and cheese, and then we feel like crap, and we do it all over again. And so we really have to change from the inside out, and it's really hard because I think that a lot of society and parts of society really kind of still put us in these boxes and say, this is who you are, and to step outside of that box makes you feel uncomfortable. And so just like your body, your brain's the same way. Your brain isn't a muscle, and Jim talked about this earlier, but it functions like that. And so going from that to that is hard, and it takes a lot of persistence and not giving in. And it's exhausting because the brain is only 2% of our body mass, but it takes up 20% of our energy's resources. So the reason that you have habits is so that you can conserve energy. That's the brain's main goal, along with recognizing patterns and keeping you alive. And it wants to save energy so it can store it for later in case a tiger runs at you. And so these habits are really hard to break, but if you keep with it, it slowly changes over time. And I find this with myself is that, you get to a certain point and it just becomes so hard and you become so exhausted. Because willpower is taxable. What's interesting about willpower is that if you're not using your willpower, it's hard to use it for really big things because you have to kind of build up. So willpower is also like a muscle. So you start with, the easy things, and as you work up, then it gets easier and easier because your willpower gets stronger and stronger. And so I really like to really promote the idea, because I think that we all get to the point where we try so hard but we fail, and it really is a matter of the willpower that you have, and to kind of keep at it because your willpower will get stronger. Attention is the most important thing, and I think that we know. So there's 3 things to promote plasticity that's really helped with me, and attention is the most important thing. And I think that we kind of kid ourselves when we're paying attention. We're reading a book, or oh, I read lots of books, and I engage and I go to seminars or whatever, but we're kind of half there. It really requires novelty and really putting attention at your focal point and checking in and asking yourself, am I really paying attention? And then applying it. So we learn a lot, but then we don't share it. Or, we go, we take one yoga class, we're like, oh, I don't like it. So you just kind of, move on. And so to really pay attention to get past that barrier. And to unlearn is so important. So cortical real estate, plasticity is competitive, and cortical real estate is limited to a certain extent. And so if you have certain neurons that are connected to each other, you kind of have to undo them in order to create a better, more healthy pattern in your mind that's more beneficial or more creative, and just allows you to unleash your potential. And so unlearning is so important, and I think that's habits. So there's the cue, your action, and then the reward that follows. So look in your day and kind of see what is triggering it. For me, when I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm trying to do my work, I've noticed lately, because that's just been kind of my thing. I get up and I go to the couch and I start doing my work. And if I'm at the couch versus sitting at my desk, there's a huge difference in kind of my outlook on the day and how much I get done. And those simple kind of things, which I think were like, but I like sitting on the couch. Like, what's the big deal? Like, I don't have to sit at the desk to do my work. To really look at those things and figure out, what do I need to unlearn? What habits and what processes do I need to unlearn in order to open up some space for new connections to be made? And mindfulness. Now, I'm not very spiritual, and I was never a meditator. And I always hear people talking about meditation, and I'm like, that's awesome. I don't know how you do it. And I think that we have some misconceptions about what meditation is. And, it's not, and for those of you that, practice it, I'm sure that you'll agree, it's not sitting and thinking of nothing. That's just not possible. The idea is, and when we're talking about the subconscious, is to focus on something else so your mind isn't constantly going, because that internal dialogue, unless you focus on something else, is just going to keep going through your mind. So I'd like everyone to put one hand on each leg. We're going to do like a little practice. So take a deep breath as we learn, from the belly, the balloon, and then out slowly. And I want you to focus all your attention and consciousness on feeling from the inside out your left hand. And that's it. So you're focusing and feeling your left hand, the sensations, the tingle, the energy that's there. Maybe you have a little cramp, maybe you have arthritis, so it's a little painful. You're focusing on that pain. And then what will happen is you're like, this is stupid. I don't know. Oh, crap, I got to go get that thing tomorrow. And, okay, so I can't forget to do that. And then when you realize that you're doing that, you just bring yourself back to your hand. And then, now, switch your consciousness to feel your right hand. The subtleties there, the way that your hand feels on your leg, perhaps the warmth, the tingle, the energy. And that's really what mindfulness is, and how it's interesting, because scientists say that the best way to promote plasticity in your brain is to engage in some sort of mindfulness practice every day. And it's really about, for one, taking time to kind of undo and unwind the stress, because we're inundated with so much, and to just take a moment and feel your body. I mean, we're so disconnected, and a lot of what happens in our body, triggers what happens in our mind. And to take some time just to feel your body. And then you can do a motion kind of meditation where you sit and you kind of watch the emotions come and go, but you don't make that connection with them. So with mindfulness, what I really like about it the most is that you can practice it in your everyday life. I don't really sit and meditate a lot, but what I do is in my everyday life use some of these key principles. So one of them is mental noting, which I really like. So, you're sitting there and something pops into your head and you get really angry at yourself about something. Oh my God, I totally forgot to start the dishwasher, so when we get home, the pots are gonna be ready, and then our family's coming over, 5 minutes after that, and so I'm gonna have to hand wash everything, and that's gonna take me 20 minutes, and why am I so stupid? And instead of going there, instead of continuing that conversation and continuing that dialogue, notice and say, I'm judging myself. Judging, judging, judging. And soon your mind will move on to something else. So the mental noting thing is really interesting, especially when you're dealing with other people, not to keep that internal dialogue going, because it makes those connections in your brain, and it's running the electricity round and round and round. And the deeper that you make those grooves, the harder it is to come out of them. So the closer that you can get to that point where you see and you notice what you're doing, and to just put one word on it. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be right. But when you put one word on something, your ego kind of takes a step back and says, like, okay, so I'm just being judging right now, versus taking it personally, like it's something that you're really doing wrong, and then it creates all this different kind of chaos in your mind. And then the other thing I really like doing, and it's about kind of, again, the noise. So we're inundated all the time with so many different to-dos and messages and things that we have to get done, that we just go around running around our day and in this kind of space of what I got to get done, what I got to do. And so when you have simple activities like loading the dishwasher, for example, taking one glass, putting it in the dishwasher, taking another glass, putting it in the dishwasher, rinsing it, putting it in the dishwasher, and I'll sing it to myself, do whatever. So being present where you are. What I like to say, and the reason I have this cat up here, is There was a really insightful quote that I listened to in a podcast the other day, which is, there is no past. The past happened in the now. There is no future. The future will happen in the now. The now is all we have. And so often our brain is thinking to the future. Is it going to be better or worse than right now? And then thinking of the past, what do I need to learn? That mistakes that I made that I can't do again. And it is very rarely here. And so you really have to focus your attention to kind of keep it at this place. And what I like to say is live in the meow, because then it kind of like gives me like this little giggle that lightens the mood. So when I'm stressed or frustrated or beating myself up over something, I just say meow, meow, meow. And it really kind of brings you back. And then what we learned earlier, which is the breathing, which is really important, because what's interesting about the breathing is our heart rate isn't supposed to, be consistent like this. It's supposed to vary. And so what happens is we're taking very, very shallow breaths throughout the day. And what happens when you take deep breaths in and out, it turns off that fight or flight and that limbic response. Because if a tiger's chasing you, you're not going to take a minute to take deep breaths. So your body is basically informing your mind that everything's okay. So I really encourage everyone when, either you're writing and you have writer's block or, whatever you're doing to take that time to just take those deep breaths and focus on the breath, what it feels like for your chest to expand, what it feels like for the air to come in and out of your nose, and really focus on that. And if you can do it for more than 15 or 20 seconds, that's pretty amazing. What I love is even the best meditators will, say, I was about to kill my neighbor the other day. And so our life really, is chaotic. And so to stop shooting the second arrow, which is, the first arrow is the things that happen, and the second arrow is our judgment upon, what that is and how it keeps the same process and system happening in our mind. We have to relax those things in order to create new connections. So some resources. The things that have helped me the most, the Brain Science podcast is amazing. Basically, this woman interviews, there's I think like 200 episodes that you can go back and look at. Neuroscientists, psychologists, all kinds of different of people in this field. And she does a really good job at letting them talk about the science, but then articulating it to a non-science audience. A lot of my inspiration and content in my daily life and kind of how I think about the brain has come from this podcast. Digipil is really, it's kind of creepy, I guess you would say, like if you've ever done hypnosis or anything like that, but it has all these different kind of pills that you take, which are basically 30-minute sessions for like creativity and relaxation and different, kind of areas around that. And so I find them kind of fun because they did a really good job from a science perspective of creating these nice little pieces of content that really allow you to immerse yourself in a new way of thinking. Zencast is the best mindfulness. It's secular, and they, again, like the Brain Science podcast, when you download it, there'll be 200, ones. So you can kind of pick and say, oh, I need to get better at listening, the mindfulness of listening. And they have a ton of different speakers, so you can, kind of pick your favorite speakers and go through and watch those. I like doing that sometimes in lieu of, sometimes I feel like I just really can't meditate, but it's nice to sit back and like listen to someone, talk about what meditation does and how to think about it. And then Transform is also an app for the iPhone and Android that basically gives you like a daily, not affirmation, but just inspiring quotes that I really like because they're based on not just mindfulness and Zen, but also just influencers of the past and of our time. These are my 3 favorite books regarding the brain. The Brain That Changes Itself is really good for talking about really inspirational stories where, you hear what these people overcome using neuroplasticity and the plastic, nature of our brain. And so when you read those stories, you're like, I can do anything. If this person can go from here to here, I can, basically do anything with my life. Your Brain at Work is a really good one for working with teams and understanding how other people's brains work and how to position yourself and navigate that space. So what I really like about it is we automatically respond certain ways to when someone else is reacting. And it's kind of taking the flip and saying how you should approach something to get people to adopt your ideas to, to work better with you, and to, innovate, which is really cool. And then the power of habit is a really good one, that just to understand how habits are formed, how they can be broken, and the limitations. And he talks about willpower. And so I really encourage, in your life, and especially with the people that are struggling, to introduce neuroplasticity and ask, do they understand how their brain works, and like why this obsessive compulsive thing is happening, like what actually in your brain is occurring to create this feeling, because then it really kind of changes the conversation from, oh, well, this guy, 7 habits of highly effective people, if you just follow these 7 steps, then, everything is going to be hunky-dory in your life. And for a week, like, you're into it, but then you just kind of let it go because you feel a little hopeless. And, that's them, this is me. So I really encourage everyone to look at neuroplasticity as a way to, both for yourselves and the people that you love, to help change yourself and the way that your brain works. Thank you.